All right, so I'm Robert McDonald. I'm a scientist at the Nature Conservancy, and I'm happy to be at Succinct today. My research is all about how cities depend on the environment, and my collaborator Deborah Balk and I are working on a particular pursuit here on how cities get their water, how they depend on ecosystem services and freshwater ecosystem services, and then how different populations in cities depend on ecosystem services. So are the urban poor more or less dependent on forests to keep their water clean than people who get water from municipal supply, for example? Are the urban poor more or less dependent or more or less vulnerable to climate change than people who are drinking from the municipal supply, from the tap? So we kind of have two big goals. One of them is just creating a database. Surprisingly, given how important this issue is, there's not a map out there of where these cities get their water. So that's one of our goals, is just to make that database and make that map. And then we want to then take that map and use some tools from the Natural Capital Project and others to map the ecosystem services that cities depend on, and then think about use some climate change models to model how climate change will affect those. So that's sort of the goal of the pursuit in general. We're having our first kickoff meeting in September, and really the debate will be, how do we structure that database? How do we get the data and put it together, and sort of who does the work to do it? And we'll go from there. I mean, it's a good example of social environmental synthesis for a couple of reasons. First, the synthesis part is this data is out there. I mean, individual cities know where they're getting water. Individual water utilities know it. But we have to pull that data together and take this global perspective to ask some good questions that are important scientifically. On the social environmental side, I mean, water is interesting for me because it is that linkage, right? I mean, it's physical flow of water downhill. The landscape affects how that water flows, and forests and natural habitats affect how that water flows. But then so do human decisions about how you manage water. So if you have a reservoir, if you have dams, or if you're taking water from groundwater, all those human gray infrastructure things affect the hydrologic cycle as well. So to understand how cities affect global hydrology, you're at that interface of sort of the social system and the environmental system. And I'm also excited about how this project's making us relate more to demographers and people who deal with urban poverty, because it's a whole different set of issues, a whole different set of data when you start thinking about issues of economic class and access to resources and governance, because many of the folks who don't have access to municipal water supply are in informal settlements, so settlements that don't have title from the government. So it's a complex set of issues. I think it's a good example of social environmental synthesis, and I'm just excited to kind of be here and be starting the project.